Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, FY 2022 Tribal Justice Capacity Building Training and Technical Assistance Program Solicitation Overview, hosted by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. This time, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Julius Dupree, Policy Advisor with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Julius?
Thank you, Daryl. Good afternoon, everyone. As Daryl mentioned, my name is Julius Dupree, and I'm a policy advisor with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And I actually, as part of my portfolio, I manage the tribal corrections capacity building solicitation. And so today I'm just going to kind of give you a brief overview of that particular training and technical assistance opportunity, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. So I'll just go ahead and get started here. Okay, the first slide here is really, it talks about OJP's mission as well as the Bureau of Justice Assistance mission. And so the Office of Justice Program's mission is to enforce the law and defend the interests of the United States according to the law, to ensure public safety against threats, foreign and domestic, and to provide federal leadership in preventing and controlling crime, to seek just punishment for those guilty of unlawful behavior, and to ensure fair and impartial administration of justice for all Americans. As it relates to BJA's mission is to provide leadership and services in grant administration and criminal justice policy, development to support state, local, and tribal justice strategies to achieve safer communities. And the overarching goal is to work with communities, governments, and nonprofit organizations to reduce crime, recidivism, and unnecessary confinement, and promote a safe and fair criminal justice system. So the Tribal Corrections Capacity Building Training and Technical Assistance is actually a comprehensive approach that's really designed to provide training and technical assistance to strengthen tribal correctional system capacity. And so that includes, public safety, as well as facilitating successful community reintegration efforts. And as you'll hear later, we've kind of revamped this training program so that it really addresses the continuum of the correctional system. Eligible applicants, as you can see here, for-profit organizations, other than small businesses, Native American tribal organizations, other than federally recognized tribes, nonprofit organizations having a 501c3 status with the IRS, other than institutions of higher learning, nonprofits that do not have a 501c3 status with the IRS, other than institutions of higher education, private institutions of higher education, as well as public and state-controlled institutions of higher education. And there's another category that I'm going to discuss here shortly. But, if you're in on this webinar and you're listening, and, you do not fall within this category, then I don't know how useful it'll be unless you're listening in for some agency that is eligible. But that's really kind of the summary there on eligibility. As it relates to other requirements, so if you are, as a result of an executive order around safe policing for safe communities, the Attorney General has actually determined if you are a state, local, and university or college law enforcement agency, that you must be certified by an approved independent credentialing body to have actually started the certification process to be eligible for any FY 2022 DOJ discretionary grant program. And then you can read this requirement further in the solicitation, but it's really around, agencies' use of force policies really need to be consistent with federal, state, and local laws. And those kinds of policies maybe include chokehold prohibitions, except in situations where deadly force is allowed by law. Another eligibility, potential eligibility is if you are an organization that wants to submit along with 2 or more entities you can definitely do that. However, only one entity would be the applicant, and then the other applicants would actually be considered sub-recipients or sub-grantees. And for more information, you can go to that OJP Grant Application Resource Guide for more information on that. So I just kind of want to give you an overview of the current tribal corrections capacity building training and TTA services that are provided. Just so you all kind of get an idea of what the program currently provides. We actually have, we offer a tribal probation academy to actually provide training to new probation officers. We also provide intermediate training opportunities on evidence-based community supervision practices, as well as ad hoc technical assistance to support community supervision capacity building. We also offer tribal intergovernmental reentry workshops that provide the participants with the tools they need to develop effective reentry plans. We also do ad hoc technical assistance to support the implementation of effective community reintegration strategies. And as you know, these activities or these events are not specified in the solicitation. I mean, we've seen great success with all of these events and this strategy, but the solicitation is not, as open as you can see. It's general to where we're really, looking for you to come to us with what you all perceive as successful strategies to achieve the desired goals under the Tribal Correctional Capacity Building TTA. You can either include these, or you may have other activities that you think would be more effective. So we're open to hear your ideas on that as well. As I mentioned, so previously this program really focused solely on community corrections and reentry. But this year, we really added an institutional corrections piece, and that's really kind of because it's all related, really. I mean, if you have someone who's detained and they're eventually getting out, it's really going to be important that they get sufficient programming pre-release or even while they're in to actually help prepare them to transition to the community. And so as far as this institutional corrections piece, we're really looking to make sure that we have availability of training to help plan, implement, or enhance effective culturally competent practices and programming as it relates to community corrections and supervision. We really want to make sure that we're addressing community supervision training needs and practices. As it relates to reentry, we want to make sure that we have resources to help folks plan, implement, or enhance reentry programming strategies for tribal communities. So the objectives of the TTA, of the Training and Technical Assistance Program, so one objective is to support tribes that receive competitive grants under our Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation, also known as CTAS, Purpose Area 3, which that purpose area focuses on tribal justice systems. And so tribal justice systems really, it is a pretty broad category, but specifically the recipient of this particular award would actually provide support to tribes that receive funding focused on reentry, institutional and/or community corrections activities. Additionally, another objective is to develop and deliver training, peer learning opportunities, and other resources to the tribal justice field on institutional and community corrections and reentry from incarceration into Indian country. And so, as you can see, we have two buckets, if you will. One, some of the training's got to be really focused on BJA grant recipients, but there's still a component that where you don't have to receive grants from BJA to receive our training and technical assistance under this particular program. So as far as the deliverables go, the first one, as you can see here, is really focused around providing individualized, efficient, and consistent delivery of training and technical assistance in order to get CTAS Purpose Area 3 grant recipients to accomplish their goals by the end of their project periods. And the subcomponents of that deliverable, the expectation is that you'll develop individualized training and technical assistance work plans for each grant recipient based on the grantee's goals outlined in their funded application. Assign each grantee a training and technical assistance coach to assess and identify grantee training and technical assistance needs. Also, the selected provider must undertake efforts to anticipate quickly quickly identify and address challenges that arise during training and technical assistance delivery. All training provided with BJA funding must provide a mechanism for pre and post testing knowledge of pre and post testing of knowledge and other assessment of impact. So we really want to make sure that we're getting information about the efficacy of the training and technical assistance. And so that for us would involve pre-test as well as post-test. So another expectation as far as deliverables is that the training and technical assistance provider staff will have sufficient subject expertise and to assist grantees in the execution of their projects. The staff should have the necessary technical skill sets and experience to effectively be able to coach grantees and assist them in reaching their goals. And so this coaching piece is actually something that we're really trying to do more of. So we're really kind of pushing that. I don't want to say that's new, but it's not. We haven't been practicing it as consistently with all of our programs, but that is something that we're going to be expecting under this particular TA solicitation. So there are occasions where an external expert will be required. So to this end, the training and technical assistance provider must utilize a range of vetted tribal and/or national subject experts, including practitioners, academics, and federal partners. Another deliverable is as part of this oversight of staff and experts, the training and technical assistance provider must document a plan to ensure that it has a set of diverse staff, trainers, and/or subject matter experts that reflect a mix of experience and perspectives. Okay, so coordination is very important. So what we really want to make sure is that whoever receives this award will actually participate in ongoing collaboration and coordination. That in the subcomponents here, as you see, is coordination in tribal jurisdictions, coordination across interest groups, coordination with federal partners as well. Interest groups may include BJA tribal training and technical assistance providers, may include the National Congress of American Indians, Native American Rights Fund, or other entities that are looking to influence public policy in the area of tribal justice. Some of the federal partners may include Bureau of Prisons, may include Bureau of Indian Affairs, as well as U.S. Probation. So another deliverable is actually the training and technical assistance provider should prioritize responses to requests from practitioners and assist unfunded applicants in consultation with BJA. So if you do get a technical assistance request from a non-grant recipient, we would expect that, if it's a large request or, regardless of the size of the request, we would like to be informed of that and that particular training and technical assistance and what kind of strategy is going to be used to work with that particular request. We also like to see you maintain a listserv of grantees, sub-grantees, and key contacts that are responsible for undertaking grant and related activities, including interested tribal, state, and local contacts in federal and national partners. So another thing that we're going to want to see is that the training and technical assistance provider is going to serve as a thought leader and an information clearinghouse for relevant research and best practices. And some of the subcomponents of that deliverable is creating knowledge diffusion products such as fact sheets and webinars and disseminate them through BJA's networks. Disseminating best practices and lessons learned by attending and presenting at national, state, local, tribal, and other conferences and events, as well as convening grantee learning communities based on their prospective projects, programs, to actually explore best practices and lessons learned. And so, you know, so there may be, it may be a good idea to look at convening, you know, the cohort of grantees to discuss their progress or let them engage in information sharing with other grant recipients of CTAS Purpose Area 3 grant funds. But also, even for the non-grantees, look at convening maybe a focus groups of practitioners, if you will, to actually inform, you know, some of the strategies and inform us regarding emerging issues or needs in the area of focus. And also, you know, there are a number of conferences, or national level conferences that come up, and so when those, like, you know, I could say for one example would be the American Indian Justice Conference. So we would expect that you would submit like a proposal for a workshop that would, like, kind of highlight some priority issue that's impacting tribes in the area of corrections. So another deliverable here is that the training and technical assistance provider must proactively build a field of knowledge and capacity in the area of tribal corrections. So the subcomponent to this is actually assisting grantees in the collection of performance measure data for submission in the performance measurement tool. For those of you who may not know, as far as the way we capture performance measurement information from grant recipients, is we have a performance measure tool that the grant recipients are required to complete. And sometimes they need help or assistance in compiling that information. So the expectation would be that you would work with the grant recipients on that. Based on performance reporting trends and training and technical assistance needs assessments, we would expect that you would propose to and work with BJA on tailoring the TTA strategy to meet emerging needs and trends. And that kind of goes back a little bit too about being a thought leader and capturing all the latest developments in the field. So priority considerations. If you had an opportunity to review the solicitation, you'll notice that there's one priority consideration that you can be eligible for under this particular opportunity, and that is advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities. As you can see here, Part A is priority consideration will be given to applicants that include projects that will promote racial equity and the removal of barriers to access and opportunity. Subsection B, priority consideration to applicants that can demonstrate that their capabilities and competencies for implementing proposed projects are enhanced because of the applicant identifies as culturally specific organization. And you'll see in the solicitation, it talks a little bit more detail about that, because you'll have to kind of demonstrate, you know, if you're not the agency that has that capability, then if you're working with another agency that does, then the budget should reflect that you have an agency that you're working with that has that skill set. But if this priority consideration does apply to your agency, you're going to have to address that in the program narrative attachment section of the solicitation. And as you'll see, there's a capacity, a competence and capacity section of the program narrative, and so you'll address that priority consideration in that particular narrative. And so the definition of a culturally specific organization is in the solicitation, but I would just kind of read it out loud so it's clear. costly specific organizations are defined for purposes of this solicitation as private, nonprofit, or tribal organizations whose primary purpose as a whole is to provide costly specific services to, among others, Black people, Hispanics, and Latina people, Native American, and other indigenous peoples of North America, including Alaska Natives, Eskimos, and Aleuts, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and/or Pacific Islanders. As far as award eligibility, so one thing that we're doing differently than we did in previous years for this particular opportunity, we last competed it in FY18, and it was more of a bifurcated solicitation where it had two. You could either apply for tribal reentry training and technical assistance, or you could apply for tribal community supervision, which was the tribal probation piece of it. And so those were separate awards. So this year we're only making one award. And so whatever awardee comes in for this opportunity will have to, possess that skill set to cover both reentry, community corrections, and institutional corrections programming. And that is for like one award for up to $1 million. And that's for a 24-month time frame, reward period. The period of performance start date will be October 1, 2022, but our incumbents of this particular, of the awards for tribal reentry and community corrections, their awards will go until 9/30/2023. So there is going to be some overlap, but that's to be expected because obviously we would want for you all to, whoever receives the award, to actually transition smoothly. And there's going to be it's going to take a while to kind of transition. So that may be a year-long process in itself. Once you get the award funding, then once you start, we'll have to work with you all on bringing you up to speed on expectations, and then you may have to work with the other providers that are currently in place in order to to seamlessly or to effectively transition the project. So if some of you who may have applied for funding from us before know that we do provide continuation funding in certain cases. So depending on the performance of the awardee, after the 24-month period, there may be an option to provide continuation funding under this project to carry out the duties and activities for additional for future years. So as far as the application information that needs to be submitted, you'll have to submit a proposal abstract. You'll have to submit a proposal narrative. You'll be submitting a budget worksheet and a budget narrative. Now you got to use the web-based form for that. You also will need to submit a time and project task plan. Document any proposed subrecipients, if any, and I talked a little bit about that earlier. Resumes of key personnel must be included, as well as work product examples. And I know that the solicitation is real specific around those requirements, so really read those requirements closely. But I'll note that if your application submission does not include this information, then it will disqualify you from further review, because that's what's needed in order to meet the basic minimum requirements of this particular solicitation. So as far as the application review criteria, you'll see the statement of the problem here is 10%. The project design and implementation is worth the most. That's weighted at 40%. Capabilities and competencies is the second most, that's 35%. Then you're going to have to provide a plan for collecting data for the performance measures, and so that's 5%. And then there's a budget that's actually 10%. So the way you're going to apply for this solicitation will be through the Grants.gov and the JustGrants system. And the way it works here is there's going to be dual deadlines. And so what that means is for your first step, the applicant will have to submit what's called the SF424, which is really like I call it kind of like the cover page of the application, but that's kind of where you provide all your contact information and any other agency-related information, entity-related information. And then also the SFLL, which is actually your disclosure of lobbying form. That's all going to need to be submitted to Grants.gov by May 11th, 2022 at 8:59 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And so that step definitely needs to be completed before you can advance to step 2. But, just even though it seems like that date, that May 11th is kind of, like much earlier than the final submission date, which is May 23rd, it may only take you about 10 minutes to complete this task. So, so you have plenty of time to do that. I mean, you could probably do it, it's April 1st, you could probably get on and do it pretty quickly. But you definitely have to do that to advance to the next step, because the next step, step 2, will be where you need to submit the full application, including all the attachments in JustGrants by May 23rd, 2022 at 8:59 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And so, you have the links there. You have the link to register for Grants.gov. You also have the link to get into JustGrants. I'll talk a little bit more about where you should go if you have questions or if you have issues submitting your application. So Grants.gov, they do have availability for technical assistance if you have problems submitting your SF424 and the SFLL. You can see the customer service hotline here. There's also an email address. And for those of you who may not be aware, so Grants.gov, the best way to describe Grants.gov is it's like the fulcrum of all federal government funding opportunities. So all federal government funding opportunities are posted in Grants.gov. So regardless if it's DOJ, if it's Health and Human Services, if it's USDA, Department of Agriculture, or any other federal agency that provides grant funding, it has to go through the Grants.gov system. Okay, so one thing I wanted to highlight, I don't know if you all have started on your application yet, but I did want to highlight the fact that the federal government is actually transitioning from a data universal numbering system, which is our DUNS system, which that's what most of you may have known who've applied for our Department of Justice funding before. It's actually transitioning to the SAM UEI, or Unique Entity Identifiers system, on April 4th, 2022. So all entities applying for DOJ funding opportunities that have a Grants.gov close date after March 31st must take the following actions. You need to complete and submit the SF424 and SFLL no later than March 30th of 2022 at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So, if you aren't able to do that, and the day is March 30th, so my sense is that most of you on this call may not be able to do that. I think the easiest thing to do would be to wait until April 1st, because that's when because the Grants.gov transition is going to be occurring March 31st, but so that you don't have to worry about those conditions that I mentioned earlier, then I would really suggest that you wait till April 1st to begin to submit the Grants.gov application. So JustGrants, actually, so it is our kind of cradle to grave grants management system. And so what I mean by that is it really offers a streamlined end-to-end process for enabling applicants and grantees to move seamlessly through the full grants management lifecycle. So from the time that an application is submitted, till the grant gets, if there's any sort of grant adjustments that need to be done, and then also through to close out of the actual project. The JustGrants is going to be the one-stop place for all that. JustGrants also gives applicants and award recipients new ways to manage their own entity information and that of users in the system. Okay, so for your application submission, these are some really key things to remember. Before you actually get, on a line to submit the application, I would recommend that you identify the forms that are needed to submit an application. Also complete the web-based budget form that I referred to earlier. And there's some certifications in the applications that are not necessarily requirements, but if you find that those additional certifications apply to you, ensure that you address those certifications as part of your application submission. And then finally, you'll want to submit the application. So JustGrants offers a couple of different options for support. There's tutorials that are available online to actually to help you with kind of step-by-step training on JustGrants. Also, you can learn more about the grants management and the financial system through the JustGrants.gov or the JustGrants.usdoj.gov website listed here at the bottom of the page. So for JustGrants technical support, there's that you're really going to want to make sure you have this information handy. Like if you need technical assistance with submitting the full application, you're going to want to make sure that you have access to that customer support hotline that I provide there. There's also the email option as well that you can use to get assistance. One of the things I just want to highlight is just because when you get to there may be some times when there's maintenance done on the system, so just make sure you're planned accordingly. I would not wait till the last minute to get your application submission in. That's an error that, well, I know we're all guilty of procrastination, but sometimes it could be fairly costly when there's a lot of money on the line, and so just really be cognizant of your timeline and ensure that you've got everything that you need to submit the grant application on time. So OJP Response Center. So this used to be NCJRS for some of you who are familiar with a lot of our former or previous opportunities. So this is where you go for general solicitation support and guidance. So, for instance, if you have a, question about whether something's allowable under the program, you can go there to them. They'll probably reach out to me, and I'll have to help out with the response to that. But that's the OJP Response Center is an avenue that you're going to use for those general types of grant requirement or, substance-related questions. Another thing I wanted to mention, and then you can see there's the response center hours. So be sure that you're informed on that, because it's you can see it's from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Monday through Friday. So one of the things you can also do to receive notifications is you can subscribe to the www.ojp.gov/subscribe, and that way you'll get the most current information on all the Office of Justice Programs grant funding opportunities, and you'll also receive the monthly Just Info newsletter. Okay, and here's some additional resources here. We have our OJP Funding Resource Center. That's where you'll see all the OJP funding opportunities. The financial guide is very helpful. It'll give you an idea of kind of what would be required of you if you were to receive funding, as far as like managing the cooperative agreement, because this is going to be a cooperative agreement. Also, there's a grants financial management online training that's available. You can see the website there. And so for those of you who haven't done that training, it would be a requirement. It's maybe a special condition that you take that training. But for those of you who have taken it, and if you're in compliance with that, you can always still go back to it, or you can have another employee on your staff, or someone that may be new to your staff. This would be an excellent opportunity for them to take that training. There's a grant application resource guide, and you may see some references to that in the grant solicitation, so that's a very helpful tool. And then there's the National Institute of Justice's crimesolutions.gov website, and that's a good place to go if you kind of want to find out about, best practices, evidence-based practices that are being used across the criminal justice system continuum. So as additional resources, so we have webinars that we do actually to really help facilitate the funding application process. And as you can see here, we've already done the one for funding opportunities for your community in 2022. So that's really kind of like an overview of like what's ahead as far as the availability of funding. And then there's another one called Funding Process, First Steps to Applying, How to Prepare, and also other considerations. And so both of these webinars have actually already been done, and the recordings are available at the website or the link below. Now we do have a webinar coming up tomorrow that's actually focused on BJA funding and resources around corrections, reentry, and justice reform. And that particular webinar is March 31st, 2022, tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And actually, it's going to talk about all the corrections-related funding opportunities that BJA is offering this year. So that includes site-based opportunities, site-based grants, but it also includes other corrections, training, and technical assistance opportunities as well. So if you're interested in that, please stay tuned for that. When another slide I just wanted to highlight here is if you really want to subscribe to OJP to get notifications about funding updates and that sort of thing, you can text OJP your email address to the number listed here. Also, BJA has an active social media. There's a Facebook page information as well as Twitter. And then for all information regarding funding opportunities, publications, BJA initiatives, you can just go to the general BJA website listed here. So the quick reference tools here are again, I'm just going to summarize these. He's already talked about them. For solicitation content assistance, that's the response center. There's a number listed there. Then there's the Grants.gov number, as well as the JustGrants information as well. Okay, so I guess with that, we can go ahead with the questions.
Okay, thanks for that, Julius. Very informative and a lot of good resources that people can access post-webinar here. So as you can see on the slide, if you do have a question, please go ahead and enter that in the Q&A box on the far bottom right of your screen. Look to get to those as they come in order. I just want to note, it's been mentioned in the chat that the recording, PowerPoint, and transcript for today's webinar will be posted to the BJA website. So if there's something you want to go back and reference today, you'll be able to do so once that is posted. So there's a question that's come in, Julius. To clarify, is it possible for an applicant to receive both priority considerations, not just one or the other?
The answer to that is yes. An applicant can receive both priority considerations. Just clearly indicate that in the capabilities and competency section of the solicitation.
That's the only question in the queue at this time. We'll just leave things open for a little bit. Just as Julius mentioned, we're just going to keep this quick reference card up if you do have questions about solicitation, Grants.gov or JustGrants. And then obviously anything specific and detailed about this particular opportunity can be found in the solicitation itself, which is posted on the BJ website as well. Okay, with that, I mean, I think it was a pretty comprehensive, Julius, so there's really not too many questions. I think a lot was covered during the presentation within solicitation. You just hang on for a few more moments. Do you see everybody still on? Okay, so I think that's the last question in the queue at this time. But if you do have a question, please go ahead and direct it to one of these entities. And please, as mentioned, to keep an eye out for the BJ website for this PowerPoint recording to be posted. So on behalf of the Bureau of Justice Assistants and our panelists, we want to thank you for joining today's webinar. This will end today's presentation.